And then
started.
Sonia. But I will let her know that a little bit before.
Welcome to this workshop of the Hopkins School Board. Happy to be at the table with our board colleagues and student board reps and our community members who have joined us in the physical space as well as on YouTube. We have two agenda items this evening. The first one is our school year calendar, and I'll turn that over to Dr. Mary Peary-Reed.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland, and good evening to everyone. I'm going to invite Dr. Lightfoot to the board table. He is our resident calendar guru, but he does work with a team to develop the school year calendars, and then he's really great about getting feedback from school leaders, from teachers, from the union leaders to make sure that the calendar reflects all of the priorities that have been identified. So we'll get feedback and answer your questions tonight, and then I do believe we're hoping that the calendars will be approved at the November 15 board meeting. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you. I'll pass these around that way. Sometimes people like me like hard copy to work from. Sometimes people feel more versed in the digital space, so hopefully we've provided you with the opportunity to utilize both. What is coming around are two options. So when you see the packets, make sure you grab option 1 and option 2 because they do look a heck of a lot alike, but the reality is they are a whole lot of different.
Ooh, I looked, I couldn't figure out what the difference was, so I'm excited.
Isn't it all like a big old puzzle? My daughter likes these YouTube videos that are, in my world, I don't know why people watch, but people really do watch. But the one we were watching last night was this puzzle solver. And this puzzle solver takes the most difficult, like Rubik's type of puzzles and works them through in all of these little like ways that you turn it to help expedite it and like get it done and faster than you can anticipate. And I was thinking about that last night. I'm like, doing a lot of this calendar work is like taking all of those pieces and puzzles and putting them together and trying to make things work and trying to balance out all of the needs that come in front of us in a very specific set of days that has some latitude, but one decision has the effect of pulling a thread that makes what you thought you might have had done before just not possible. So we've been working on calendar options since last May. We began this work with the idea, knowing that with our upcoming 6th grade, 9th grade transition, that we may have some specific needs that might be accordingly addressed within the calendar. And as well, what we also looked at were the continuation of the work that the board did last year to include additional holidays. So we knew that the work that we needed to do, we wanted to make sure that we had solidified for 23-24 in that school year. In the past, we come before you with 2 years, but knowing that we would be within the first year of our transition with 6th grade and 9th grade, we really focused on creating 1 year of a calendar so that we would have a good idea of how we might be able to utilize that information and what we might be able to learn from that might guide additional conversation in planning for 24-25. So what you see and what's in front of you are two options. Those two options have been narrowed down from 8. We started with multiple possibilities. As you know, Minnesota statute does allow for us to start prior to Labor Day if we have amounts of constructions that do exceed, I think it's 400,000 in one specific building. And yes, we do have that with our long-term facility maintenance dollars, and so certainly that was an option. But part of the transition and what we know from the transition is that we will have some construction components. When we think of use of space, so for example, one of the 6th, 9th grade transition elements that we are looking at now is lab space. So when we think about additional lab requirements, while we have adequate lab space right now at Hopkins High School, we will need to be reconfiguring the room and the room usage to make sure that at any given time we have enough lab space to accordingly be able to provide that programming that we know needs to happen. So those are some of the considerations that we were working with as we were thinking about some of the influencing factors in the calendar work. So that in and of itself said, if we need as much time as we can get throughout the course of the summer, and in conversation with our Director of Buildings and Grounds and our Director of Business Services, what we looked at was, yes, we really do, and we need to have some of these items mapped out in October, November. So in order for us to kind of figure out with the bidding process and getting all of those lined up, we really need our calendar decisions to be in October, November so that they know how much time they have to work with. So that's just an example of how one question can then really guide the rest of the calendar. So what you will see is both options start after Labor Day. Specifically with the idea in mind that we would have enough time in the course of the summer to make those internal modifications to facilities that we know will be necessary through the course of the work that we have ahead. So that, I would say, would be element number one that we were looking at that was an influencing factor. The other thing that we heard from staff is if there's a way that we can look at professional development as we make these changes, and any site needs that we might have for professional development, that would be another item within the calendar that we would like to see and would want to plan for. So in this calendar, what will strike you is if you look at the beginning, which is the start of what we used to call Workshop Week, still call Workshop Week, but what you will see as an addition is 2 professional development days. And you will see those 2 professional development days prior to what would typically be the workshop. And the reason we put that in there was, if you think about the transition, the other element that we will have occurring is that, for example, with the addition of 9th grade at Hopkins High School and 4 grade levels instead of 3, you have a potential introduction of approximately 25% of new staff. If we think also about that element happening at West and at North, and as well within our elementary programs where staff will be shifting, what we know is that additional time for buildings to have that as opportunities to build culture, to acculturate, to have those starting opportunities for educators to work with one another through the professional development, through their collaboration. Those days are important considerations for us. So you will see in both options that that has been added at the beginning of that period of time in August, so that you can see that those 2 days are in addition to the start of that workshop. And the idea that we mentioned with that was that that would be intentional, giving us some of that additional time up front. Previous calendars, that has been distributed throughout the course of the year. If that were distributed throughout the course of the year, as you're aware from calendars, if we have a starting point, the only way that we can then change is if we add those days back into the course of the rest of the calendar year, is to push the ending date further into June. And what we have heard over numerous calendars from students, from families, from staff, ending in June at a reasonable time is another element that people like to see within the calendar. So we knew that as well, and you will see that within the calendar, it's the second week of June, which is very typical for us when we think about traditional timeframes with which we've kind of seen the end of the school year. So in our design, and the 2 options that you see here, we looked at the start of school, we looked at the end of school. We also know that we have to meet those state minimum requirements. We look at 165 educational days required. We are well within our ability to deliver on that, and you will see that the models that are here meet that threshold. In addition, we have mapped out the hours of time that are built into this. That's more of an instructional content within the course of a day that isn't as detailed here on these calendars for you because most of the decisions that the board has in front of it are start dates, end dates, and specific placements of materials that occur throughout the course of the calendar year. But when we looked at the start, looked at the end, that gave us the then threshold of what we were looking at with when Labor Day happened, when we looked at potentially ending in June, and then began the work of the additional placement of the elements that fall within the calendar. Conferences, professional development day, holidays, spring break, winter break, MEA, and then once those elements get placed on top of the calendar start and end periods, what we look at is where can we move those items, what flexibility do we have, and what considerations do we need to make. Specifically at the high school, that also impacts quarters. As you will see within the models that we have put together, we tried to do as much balancing as we can, more predominantly with the high school so that we don't end up with 38 and 44. I mean, that level of difference within courses can definitely shift the impact of that course, and so we know we tried to work toward that balance as part of the calendar design as well. Those are some of the, I would say, key elements that we looked at, that we built in. Some of the other considerations are really that 2-week of winter break time, and then what we looked at where the holidays fall, what that placement looks like, and what we also looked at this time is that when we went through the calendar planning, we made sure that we had, for example, in the month of September, we have Labor Day. We also have Yom Kippur built in. The work that we really started to look at within September that was a consideration for us was Rosh Hashanah. And when we looked at Rosh Hashanah, what we looked within conversations within the community and with faith leaders from our Jewish partners that are located within the district is we asked the question, the date is identified as Saturday. We looked at the sundown to additional celebration, honoring of the holiday periods of time. And our question was, do we need to look at honoring that on a Friday? What guidance, what consideration, what additional elements would you ask of us? We also asked that of our staff members, specifically our Education Association leadership, Jewish staff members, and saying, how might this impact? What do we look at? And in essence, what we received was, you could do either. One of the things that we would recommend that we heard consistently was no matter which one you look at, please be mindful of Friday evening activities. And especially within the course of planning for fall evening activities, whether those be sporting events, other activities, other celebrations, that we at least be mindful of that element to make sure that whatever the calendar decision is, that we identify throughout our community and as part of our calendar that no activities should occur Friday evening. And that would be on September 15th. So you'll see both options located here, and those options have different impacts throughout the course of the calendar, and that really kind of drove recommendation number 1 and recommendation number 2. So Director Peterson, to your point about finding those points of differences within 165 days and where one of those actually is, that is one. And we can talk more in depth and in detail about that. I'm just doing some of these point out here to kind of give you a context of the map that's here. Where we also looked at is any time that we have a day that is identified as a non-student contact day, when we are working with 165 days, as we are within the elementary due to conferencing, any day that we take away has to be a day that's replaced somewhere else. Otherwise, we fall below that 165 threshold. So within this model, when you look at this model, you will see some differences based on recommendation number 2. If we are recognizing Rosh Hashanah on September 15th on that Friday, If we are doing that as a calendar, you will see one of the impacts then on December 8th. If you look at December 8th under recommendation number 2, because the middle level had additional conferencing structures that were different than the elementary and the high school, they have an additional day that could be utilized either for conferencing or for professional development. We've done that as a little bit of a placeholder there for December 7th and December 8th. However, the elementary and the high school, because conferencing days don't count as student contact days within the state statute, they do require that, since if we were recognizing Rosh Hashanah on the 15th, that we have another set of opportunities for them to be in school during those days that are structured systemically. And so that's why you'll see a difference in recommendation number 1, where December 8th is an E12 professional development day, and December 8th is a 6 through 8 professional development day. So that's one of the differences that happens within the calendar. The other one in recommendation 2, if you take a look at recommendation 2, and we know we've received feedback on this from our educational leaders, is that, yep, June 12th is hard to have a professional development day, but we also have a teacher contract that asks of us 185 days of their time. Building that 185 days into the calendar and not losing a student contact day, because remember, we can't lose that based on our conferencing structures, does place that in option number 2 at June 12th. Not ideal. We've done this many times before. It is a placement that recognizes that, certainly can be done, certainly can be used. But it is one of those sets of circumstances that when we look at where we place items, that is an impact. The other thing that is an impact, and we've also done this in partnership with our Education Association, is winter break. Within the course of our contract, it is identified through the work of our negotiations that the ideal state is that if we can have 2 weeks at winter break to restore, reconnect, to take that time, that is a desired state. You will see both of those options designing for that in recommendation number 1 and recommendation number 2. In some of our earlier modeling, we did try to say, is there a way that we could look at this? And there is. And what would need to occur for that to happen is that winter break would need to be less than 2 weeks. If winter break were less than 2 weeks, and we said, for example, instead of going up through December 22nd, in some of our earlier modeling, what we looked at was, well, maybe we could say that December 21st is the start of break. And in doing so, we could look and say, maybe we come back on the 2nd, maybe we then have potentially January 3rd as a professional development day and not have that at the end of a school year. Might be an option. When we started to explore some of those, the feedback that we initially got from our education staff is we really like those 2 weeks. This seems very disrupted. It kind of disrupts in the middle of both weeks. Is that really what we want? Would we want students to return on the 4th and 5th on those last 2 days? Would that be ideal? Or do we really kind of try and strive for those 2 weeks? And the feedback that we got from individuals was, yes, we understand some of the trade-offs, but if we have to make choices about the trade-offs, we'd probably ask to prioritize the 2 weeks in lieu of what that might look like for that last professional development day in June. So all of that being said, these are kind of the calendars that have emerged from the initial 8 that we started with. We've run them through our small group planning team. We've then brought those forth into leadership groups. We are continuing to bring those out into leadership groups. And in this workshop, we are seeking your feedback. We're seeking your insight. We're seeking your information as well. Going back, working through any of the recommendations in any greater capacity based on what we learn. And then hopefully on the 15th, bringing before you either one or two recommendations based on where these conversations take us. And then for decision, hopefully on the 15th, so that we can put this information out to our community. Our community relies on this for much of their planning, and so the sooner that we can get that to them, the better. It has been an extensive bit of work and lots of input going into it. Very appreciative as well. A couple things I'll also point out throughout the course of this. We were able to make sure that it does include all of our holiday elements. Part of the additional element that we added was Eid, and you will see that recognized on the 10th. We have had conversations with those faith communities as well. What is challenging for us about Eid is that while we identify it on that day as a specific holiday, that day might shift depending on lunar calendars. And so we know it's a placeholder. We know it's an operational item. We do feel that everywhere that we have looked and been referred to is that if we are identifying the day, we can. Hard to create a space that says maybe this day, maybe not. Might be part of our evolution with calendars into the future. But for right now, for planning purposes, we have identified that as April 10th. So with that, I think that hits my list of items that go into the construction of this. And certainly, the dialogue is open for you with any information I can provide. If there's anything that I can't, we can certainly go back. We are fortunate to have a very good digital working tool that helps us reconfigure this and make sure that all of our calculations are good. Happy to have developed that along the way, and thanks to the business office and Pam Carmen for helping us deliver on that. And we're open for questions. Pam's here as well in case we have any questions on any of the specific details that we might be able to map. But open for your questions and comments, insights, questions, wonderings.
Well, thank you so much for walking us through Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot. And you mentioned that the process has been extensive, and I would say that's an understatement. It's pretty amazing, all the work and collaboration that happens to bring these two drafts before us. And so we're certainly appreciative. And I'll open it up to my board colleagues for comments or questions, including our student board reps, of course.
Chair Westmoreland.
Yes.
Hi, I was wondering if, I think the practice in the last several school years has been to have election day off of school. And I think my understanding of that was twofold. One is it gives our staff members the opportunity to more easily participate in that fairly fundamental civic duty, but also at least a couple of schools, and I don't know every single one, but I think Alice Smith and Meadowbrook are polling places. And I know for sure in parent groups there have been some concerns about security and strangers in elementary schools in particular. I was wondering if that had been considered and if there are any, I don't know if reassurances is the word, but there's security considerations there.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at both of those options in November, you'll see that on Tuesday the 7th. That specifically is built into both calendars. And it was directly in response to what you identified based on the concerns that we received about the ways in which that we would have to structure buildings and access to the buildings throughout the course of it. And that was a direct impact and why you see that reflected in both options in November.
I wanted to clarify just to make sure that that E had just wrapped, kind of funny, and that was for sure. Only because other PD days had been designated as E/12, so thank you.
Chair Westmoreland.
Yes.
I'd like to say I did just check for the holidays to make sure, and yes, because it goes at sunset, that day of school would not be during Rosh Hashanah. This holiday doesn't start until after school. It would be over the weekend. But with the stuff after school, I would say that definitely is a concern, and I know it was one this year, even with school off. I want to double check on this, so don't quote me on it, but I believe that there were at least some sports and clubs that met anyway, even though we didn't have school on that day. So I'm thinking that if there is school, people will take that to mean that they can have extracurriculars after school as well. I don't know what the answer to that is, but I think that that was a problem this year.
Thanks for that insight. That's important. Maybe Dr. Mary Peary-Reed and Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot could speak to what that might look like operationally in terms of, like, if we did decide to have school that day, in terms of limiting those activities after school.
Well, I think, you know, I'm thinking of what we do on, for example, a snow day. We make these mass announcements that all after-school activities and athletics are canceled. And so I think it'd be something similar in terms of the community-wide announcement in multiple places, but we would have the time to be much more proactive. And so I don't know that it would be designated here on the calendar, but I imagine we could put it on the website and communicate something to that effect 2 or 4 weeks in advance, or in the beginning of the year, just so all teams and after-school activities are aware. What are your thoughts on that, Nick?
Absolutely. And I thank you for that insight. Yes, I would agree. I do believe that, and some of these calendars are developed for the sporting events years in advance. I mean, they just are. And this one, I think, and we even have to go back because it's an excellent point. We discovered that as we have our calendar for this year for Eid, we do have some sporting events that are identified on that day. So we do need to go back and even change our calendar this year. So we want to make sure that we are diligent with that as it's new for us. We're learning along the way. And if there are additional ways that we can reinforce that, absolutely, including the day of. If we are to choose an option on that Friday, to make sure that we reinforce that and to make sure that we are clear with our coaches and our programs that this is our expectation and that there is to be no activity. We need to be deliberate about that as well.
Thank you. Other questions or comments?
Yeah, I was just wondering about, I recognize why the discussion around the 2-week break in winter was centered around kind of staff input because it impacts that PD day at the end of the year. But I was wondering, did we get any kind of feedback from students or parents about, is that a preferred model for them? Or just wondering what kind of information was gathered.
As far as any direct surveying of individuals, no, we haven't done direct surveying. We always try to gather as much information as we can. Like I've said, within the course of the contract, the ideal state and the language that is contained, if at all possible, to try for that 2-week. So that's been a guiding factor. Certainly, if we are to make that, we can gather that additional information. What we have heard from families is that, for lack of better term and consistently, broken weeks, like weeks of 3 days and then 2 days, are pieces that they have continually asked us to avoid. So for this direct piece, we have not done any direct surveying on this, simply because this is really kind of the first time that people are seeing these options. But we certainly can gather some of that additional information.
Great. And yeah, just that global kind of feeling about keeping full weeks as the preferred break is kind of what I was after. And that goes not just from staff, but from families as well. That's my understanding.
I will say, like, speaking from a student perspective, honestly, like, when weeks are broken up, even if it's just like a 4-day week, the first day back, we really don't do much. So I think definitely trying to make less break-uppage, I guess, if that's the word,
It is now.
is definitely preferable, for sure.
I'm writing break uppage down.
I think one of the big pieces of feedback I heard this year as we transitioned to a more inclusive calendar that included the major religious holidays was the fact that, of course, we still have the PD days in there, right? And that it just is feeling like a lot of days off, especially in the fall. I will say, speaking as a parent, it has felt that way to me too. I'm like, who approved this calendar? Oh, right. So I think, as I listen to parents and caregivers and, I'm joking about my own situation, but it can be really, really difficult to find care. And we know that there is a child care shortage right now. We know that that is expensive, even when care is available. And so the fact that we've moved some of these PD days to August, and then the one and the recommendation 2, adding that one at the end of June, I think it's really going to be better for our families. So I appreciate that switch.
I have a question.
Sure.
Say, Nick, I have a question about how you've seen other district school calendars recognize the importance of holy days that maybe fall outside of a student contact day, and whether or not this is a space that could serve that purpose to symbolically recognize a day that isn't a student contact day. So for example, it looks like the Chinese New Year for 2023 is on Sunday, January 22nd. Well, would it be silly or sort of lack a purpose to denote that on our school calendar because Sunday is not a school day? Or for example, Juneteenth is, it's on a weekday, but it falls outside of the school year on June 19. So would that be silly, or would it be meaningful because it would signal to our stakeholders that we are thinking about religious equity across multiple spaces, even in the context of when it doesn't fall on a school day? Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. And that's the, I would say what you've identified as part of the additional challenge of the calendar and wanting to acknowledge that within the limit of how we fit 165 days within given parameters of not being able to start until after Labor Day. But what I think is important for us and where we kind of think through is that this is the instructional day calendar. But I think as we have all acknowledged, our services as a school district are throughout the course of the year. And so how might we think about calendaring as, yes, this is our instructional calendar, but this is also our programming calendar, and that we recognize on programming. So I think June 19th, if we think about that as an example, when we look at that, we as a district may not have instructional days, but we certainly have programming. And if we don't acknowledge that, and programming continues, whether that be summer programming, whether that be additional targeted services, or even choice selection options that people have throughout this, how might we make sure that we also identify those days as part of a larger calendar that is inclusive of the entire year, if you will, a July 1 to June 30 calendar that isn't only limited to show, because of course we obviously know that we have to show the instructional days and the pre-K through our literal grade 12 transition plus programming, but how might we also look at this holistically district-wide? And I know that that's on our calendar, I believe that's on our cabinet agenda tomorrow as well for part of discussion. But how might we do that to make sure that we're inclusive?
Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate you recognizing that and being so thoughtful in that process of inclusivity. I so appreciate that.
Well, and I think it's less restrictive, right? Like when we're approving these calendars, we're bound by state statute in terms of seat time, right? And if we're thinking about programming, broadly speaking, we have more discretion there. So I do think this is a really interesting conversation. We were contacted, the entire board was contacted about the possibility of adding in Chinese New Year, especially because we have our immersion programming. Chinese culture is a big part of our district. And so thinking about, the fact that it falls on a Sunday this year, but then what does that look like moving forward? So I think that this is a nuanced and important conversation. And wondering if we might want to carve out some time for it on the 15th, after you've had a chance to go back and, it sounds like we're not requesting a lot of changes to these drafts tonight. So I don't think there's going to be any sort of back to the drawing board things happening, but maybe exploring this area a little bit more, because that's something that's new to us, at least at this board table.
Chair Westmoreland, I wanted to ask if there's a way we could look at other school districts who have already implemented these type of plans of inclusivity already, and if we could compare and possibly learn from them. Is there a way we could look into that, or what?
Sorry, were you asking me?
Yes, I'm so sorry.
Oh, yes, I always think it's good to look at what other districts are doing. I know Oscar and I both gave quotes to the Sahan Journal last year after we voted on this calendar, and Director Khan, you did as well,
Yep.
right? And, the article that they wrote had us positioned as one of the leaders in the state on inclusive calendaring. That doesn't mean it's not happening in other districts, and so I think it would be great to take a look at some of those models.
Because I know it's happening in New York and possibly in California, so maybe we could learn from them. If we could explore those options, and that's for both of you, possibly, maybe if you would know more about that.
Oh, right, calendars in other states.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
because it's possible, I'm sure that New York, and I think we've had this discussion as well, you and I, that New York has already done this, and they've been doing this for a couple of years. So maybe we could learn from New York or California, possibly, but I wouldn't know how to go about doing that.
I think we could, take a look at some of the biggest districts in each state and kind of see, what they've done. I would assume that it's those districts that have sort of led on
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
But yeah, definitely something to look into.
And there are numerous examples, as we've done some of this work that we've looked at as well and collected, and you're exactly right. New York has had some of that, and then obviously these are the questions for the board, is that when we look at these options, knowing the requirements that are there, you will see the impact of those is that often those will go later into June. So it is that level of trade-off, and it is that consideration of what that looks like in accomplishing the specific goals that have been set out. So I appreciate the opportunity to look at and explore those in more detail, especially as we not only look at 23, 24, like we talked about, with this opportunity to kind of also have the additional layer of 6-9 transition on it as well, but how we look beyond that into 24, 25, and beyond as well.
Thank you.
I don't think we've yet commented on the post-Labor Day start, but, we kind of, for the past 2 years, right, we've started before Labor Day? Yeah. And so, we've heard as a board from some folks who did not appreciate that, so who will be happy about the post-Labor Day start. And I think that it's really wise, as you mentioned, as we navigate this, the 6-9 transition, to give our team more time during the summer to accomplish some of those facilities changes. So I think that was a really prudent choice. So I think bringing these two drafts back before us on the 15th, perhaps with any other considerations around some of these holidays that fall on non-student contact days and how we might want to recognize those on the calendar and think about the impact of that, that would be a really helpful discussion to have on the 15th. then with the goal of approving one of these recommendations at that meeting on the 15th. Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot, does that fit into your timeline for when you need these approved?
Absolutely, yep.
Okay.
We're ready to go with, like I said, to continue the work with these. Right now, it's making sure that we have the, really the information that our community needs as it's, really working forward and getting things scheduled and getting things planned. So the sooner we can get that to them, the better able they will be to get all of their activities calendared and scheduled as well.
Excellent. Anything else on this item? Well, wonderful. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you all.
leading us through.
Thank you, Nick.
So our next agenda item has to do with our board goals for this year, specifically around community engagement and professional development. The reason that we put these together for our conversation tonight is because Director Ross had a really, I thought, very insightful comment when we were talking about setting our board goals. And, we're kind of thinking through where the board might need more professional development or be interested in more professional development in terms of topics. And Director Ross said, well, as we're engaging with our community, we're going to learn more about what some of the needs are and what some of these things, that we need to consider at the board table might look like. And that could help us, help direct us in our individual professional development as board members and certainly as the work that we're doing as a team. So Dr. Mary Perry Reed and I have been in conversation about what some of this engagement work might look like. Board members have all now been assigned to 2 or 3 schools within the district that will be kind of like our main contact schools for the school year, as well as some instructions for communicating, best practices for communicating with our wonderful school leaders and staff and engaging with students at those sites. So that will definitely be a big part of our engagement work. We also know that we need to regularly do community engagement in order to get a sense for how our community is feeling about how we're delivering on our Vision 2031 work, what are some of kind of the main issues that are percolating. So Dr. Mary Perry Reed and I have been having some discussions around that, and I will turn it over to her to kind of talk more about that work.
Thank you, Chair Bouchard. So, board members, what we've designed more at a loose level, and then we're starting to add the finer detail, is a series of engagement opportunities where we imagine myself as the superintendent, perhaps a cabinet member such as our Director of Innovation, Design, and Learning, and 2 board members would attend each of these engagement sessions, whether virtual or in person, to provide information about where we are, what we're doing, how we're doing the important work in our district, and also to listen and learn the various perspectives that are within our community so that we can understand how people view Hopkins, so that we can understand more about our public image and what we're doing well and what we might want to focus on for growth and improvement. And so what we've imagined is that a set of engagement opportunities would begin first with a survey to our community where we identify 6 or 7 topics that parents have already said these are important topics. For example, rigor and challenging expectations, assessment, college readiness, transition supports for the 6th and 9th grade transition, managing calm and positive school cultures, the traits of our Hopkins graduates as they transition from high school off into the real world, et cetera. So we imagine providing some information in the survey with links to finer detail around each of these topics as a way of giving people's brains some information and data to just consider, and then ask for feedback around how folks are experiencing Hopkins and the quality of our services in each of these areas. So then the results of the survey and what people share with us could inform how these sessions are designed. They could potentially inform protocols we might use, or entry points for conversations, which cabinet or leaders we might want to have in a particular space, et cetera. So we have a target send date of November 1st for this survey, and then we imagine engaging in various opportunities with community members between, say, mid-November and the spring. So this isn't, like a month-long event. We imagine a much longer, several months of engagement sessions every couple of weeks. So we wanted to spread it out to make it more manageable, and also to give various members of our community opportunities to attend, depending on location, depending on whether it's virtual or in person, and also depending on the topic in which they're interested. So that's just a little bit about what we imagine for a process. We did grapple a little bit because often superintendents will just go on a listening tour, right? There's a series of sessions that are scheduled, and then we just kind of go out and listen and learn. And whatever topics come up are the topics come up. And for this series, we wanted to be a bit more intentional and have a more thoughtful structure without it being an overly rigid process. So this is the design that we have so far, and I'm personally really excited about it because, just speaking from a personal perspective and my professional role, this is my 6th year. We launched our vision in 2018, and usually superintendents and board members will engage with their communities about every 5 years. So it does seem like this would be a natural next step for us. And I think with 2 years of COVID behind us and really being in this very busy and stressful space, and COVID also being very stressful for families, it's important to sort of check back in with folks. How are you doing? How are you managing? What is going well? What are you concerned about as we're all coming out of COVID, so to speak? I know it's still around, but as we're all coming out and we're trying to establish some sense of normalcy and really get back to, okay, before COVID hit, this was our bold vision. We imagined rebuilding public education for our students who, every scholar deserves a brilliant future. And so we had Vision 2031, and we think this is a really good opportunity to revisit that and check in with folks to see what their experiences have been. So that's a little bit about what we've thought of, and I'm super open to feedback or ideas as we further shape the process.
I just had a quick question. How would the board be involved in that? Would we just show up to all of them, or?
I think what we're going to try to do is pre-schedule as many sessions as possible. We recently had a virtual engagement with parents of students of African descent, and it had been scheduled for further out, but we rescheduled it because one of our facilitators is out ill currently, and we wanted this opportunity to connect with our parents. So it was short notice for the board. We did send you an invitation to that, but that was very short notice. So we imagine very little of that and more of pre-scheduled engagement sessions, such that board members could sign up in advance, and then we're thinking 2 board members per session.
Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Sure.
And to get the word out more regarding these engagement sessions, would that be included in possible principal newsletters informing everyone?
Yep, I think website,
Okay.
newsletters,
Okay.
all of the ways that we
Right.
send information out when we
Right.
want everyone to pay attention to it.
Yeah, because I particularly enjoyed those sessions
They're-
that we've had in the past, and I think they've been very constructive and eye-opening.
Very revealing,
yeah.
and I think our constituents really appreciate a genuine opportunity to listen and learn and provide feedback, provide their testimonies around how they're experiencing our services. And one element that I did forget to talk about is we do want to figure out a way for our students to become involved. So I did send in a request through Royal Connect to have our scholars sign up to participate with us, whether it's in the design or the co-hosting, helping to facilitate the protocols.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, so we'll see. Have you seen it on the, where do you go to see the Royal Connect opportunities? Is it on your Canvas page or?
So for Royals Connect, with the way the program is set up now compared to previous years, you sign up for like one session for the whole term, and then you can't like switch out of it, which was one of the complaints we had. But as of now, I don't think you can see the other ones.
Yeah, there's also no like with our old Royals Connect, or not really Royals Connect, but Opportunity Hour, there was kind of like a canvas for that, or like a canvas for advisory. We don't have that this year, so really it's what the teachers show us on their slides. So there's no like resources for us to look back on or go to for any of that, really.
Okay, I just got a text and I've been corrected. It's not called Royals Connect, it's it's Royals Connections. So have you heard of that? So that's where, so we have Hopkins High School. I like when it pops up and it's like. So are you aware that some of your peers are serving as writing tutors in the media center, reading tutors, and tutors in our elementary schools? So there's all these opportunities for students to get involved in serving others in different ways and be paid in their service. So, and the adults who are facilitating these opportunities have to go into this space and request scholars to participate. So, have you heard of that, Royals Connections?
Not really. I don't know if that's me personally. Maybe Oscar has, but
I have heard of it. I've
Okay.
participated in it. I actually, back when it was just starting, I'm not sure if they're still offering this opportunity. I hope they are. But they just had their big grant, so they were basically just paying students to do a lot of things. It wasn't just tutoring. So I ended up creating a community ed course, like a week-long philosophy class that I taught over the summer, which was great. I hope they're still offering that. I'm not sure. I have not really tutored for them. I was just involved for that specific purpose. But I do know about it. I know that there are a solid number of other students in it. I'm not sure exactly where it's at because I have not stayed updated.
Okay.
But yeah, the names are rather confusing now that it's Royal
Yes,
Connect and they're
right.
Royal Connection.
Yeah.
Yes.
Clearly, I should probably get that right, but
I'm hoping you do
it
your
is
philosophy
very
class
close.
next summer and I'll sign up,
Will do.
so you know.
And then Principal Ballard is texting, she's watching the meeting, and she said that students get information from her weekly in a communication called the Royal Reads.
Oh,
So maybe
yes.
that's what you were
Yes.
thinking of.
There we go.
So we have Royal Reads, Royal Connect, and Royal Connections. Okay,
Wonderful.
okay.
We've all learned a lot, and
Yes.
thank you to your text partners
Right.
for helping us.
Right, providing lifelines.
Right, a phone a friend moment. Well, it's great.
So that's a description of what we're hoping for, and it'll be, I think, very fruitful and really will help us with our thinking, with our strategy. We want to nuance our approach to, as informed by what our community and parents and students tell us.
So as a board, as we're thinking through our goal area, which is community presence, thinking about that as a multi-tiered approach. So of course, the work we're doing with our schools that we're partnering with, the engagement sessions that Dr. Mary Perry Reed just outlined, partnering with our student board reps, and so we need to schedule a workshop to talk about that, how we can effectively partner with you to do some engagement at the high school. So the work that Dr. Mary Perry Reed just outlined would be one component of the activities that we'll do to achieve this board goal area. So anything else on that item, or should we take a quick break before our meeting? I'm hearing break. I heard a teeny tiny voice say break. All right, we are going to end our workshop now. See you back at the table at 7 for our regular meeting. Good evening. This meeting of the Hopkins School Board is called to order at 7:04 p.m. We'll start with some introductions so that you know who you'll be listening to this evening. We have really wonderful student board representatives who join us at our workshops and meetings. They are going to give reports later on in the meeting, so we will let them introduce themselves at that time. And so, Director Ross, let's start with you.
Good evening. My name is Jason Ross. I have 3 children who attend Tanglin Elementary. I have 2 fourth graders, 1 first grader. I currently live in Hopkins, been here as a resident for the past 8 years, moved out here on purpose from St. Paul. My wife and I met at Hamline University of St. Paul, and we liked Hopkins, what it stands for, and we're excited for the future for our kids.
Hi, my name is Director Khan. I have had 2 kids in the district. They've both graduated, and they are both at the University of Minnesota. I have lived in Hopkins for about 12 years now, and I too, just like Director Ross, picked Hopkins purposefully because of its excellent academic standards, its diversity, and just general loving atmosphere. And that's me.
Hi, I'm Shannon Andreessen, and I parent 2 children. Both went through Hopkins Public Schools, starting at Harley, and I have one at West currently. The other is a recent graduate who is at the U of M as well. And I've lived in Minnetonka for 15 years.
I am Jen Westmoreland. I currently serve as chair of the Hopkins School Board. I'm in the middle of my 2nd term. I am a proud graduate of Hopkins High School, go class of 97. I have 1 child who attends Xingjing and is in 6th grade, and really honored to be able to do this work with the fabulous people at this board table.
Good evening. I'm Rhoda Murray Puri-Reed, Superintendent of Schools. I am in my 6th year, and I have a 5th grader at Eisenhower, a 9th grader at North, and a stepson who is a kindergarten paraprofessional at Eisenhower and also works in Kids & Co.
Good evening. My name is Katie O'Shea Peterson, mom to a 5th grader and 6th grader at Meadowbrook, and have lived in the district for 12 years, I think. I think. Don't hold me to that.
Hi, I am Rachel Hartland, the other new board member as of this year. And I have 3 children, 1 at North, 2 at Meadowbrook, and was really moved to join the board to further some of the really groundbreaking and exciting work that the board does. And I'm excited to be here.
Thank you, board colleagues. So our next agenda item is open agenda. This is typically the time when we hear public comment from our community members. We know that hearing from you is crucial for being able to implement our Vision 2031. And so we offer 2 public comment periods during each meeting. The first period, which happens now, is for items that are on the agenda. You can either attend in person, fill out a comment card, give it to me before the meeting starts, and speak at the board table, or you can call and leave a message by 4 o'clock before the meeting, and that will be played publicly. We have 1 card that I've received tonight, and it's related to a topic that is not on the agenda. So that public comment period happens at the end of the meeting, and we'll invite that community member up to speak during that second public comment period. So with that, we'll move to our reports. We always start with our student board representatives' reports, and we have 4 student board reps at the table tonight, which is so exciting. And who is going to start?
I'm going to start.
Fabulous.
Okay. Hi, I'm Isabella McCoy, the Senior Cohort Coordinator. As we are nearing the end of the first term, seniors and other scholars are working hard to end on a positive note. Seniors have a multitude of things they are working on as they prepare to get ready for college. With FAFSA, Common App, Naviance, teacher recommendations, and scholarships, our seniors are hard at work, and I want to take the time to address all the work that we've done. The College and Careers Readiness Coordinator, Dr. Cool, has been a big help for seniors who are feeling stuck, lost, or confused. Also, our counselors and teachers have been equally helping prepare students for college, and we want to thank them for that. I also want to mention the board has chosen our new sophomore representatives. While unfortunately Mashida couldn't be with us tonight, Samia is here with us, and we are very excited to hear her report. We want to welcome both of them, and we are so excited in furthering our relationship with sophomores. We also recently had homecoming, both the game and the dance, and while I wasn't there due to me being at work, I heard a lot of positive feedback on the events. Lots of students attended both, and I was happy to see our Hopkins community celebrating. These events play a big part in building lasting memories for students. Another upcoming event is Election Day on the 8th. For Hopkins, my AP Gov and Politics class is holding a mock election on the 4th, open to all Hopkins students. It is a fun way to get students more involved in politics, as many of our seniors will be eligible to vote in the upcoming election. Come fill out your ballot and vote for your representative of choice in the lunchroom during all the lunches. I'll be there. We would love to see you there. One last thing I would like to touch on is the focus we are putting on building relationships at Hopkins between students, staff, and admin. We are working to create meaningful partnerships, and this starts from within. The student board commits to creating partnerships between us and student council, along with all the diverse groups at our school, and then communicating this information to both admin and the board. This will help us work out solutions to problems and address necessary needs, issues, and policies in order to create change. We want to let both the board and students know that these partnerships are upcoming, and our hope is to see the positive changes trickle throughout our school system. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabella. Thanks for your work to do to establish some of these communication pathways and partnerships. That's really exciting to hear about. And of course, we can't wait to be a part of it.
I'm up next. Thank
Fabulous.
you, Chair Westmoreland.
Wonderful.
I'm Oscar Wolf. I'm a senior representative. I'll keep my report fairly brief today. The big event that happened since our last meeting was, of course, homecoming, which Isabella touched on. I would say everything went very smoothly, very successfully. We had pretty good turnout for all of our spirit days. The dance went well, the game went well. Well, not for the football team, but it was fun to be at. Royalty was elected, which was very fun. And in my opinion, the Pep Fest was one of the most successful we've ever had. On to more board-specific things. On the Policy and Monitoring Committee, I am personally helping to reach out to more students who are actually affected by the policies that are being revised and implemented. So for the policies on attendance, wellness, and fees, we will be reaching out and sending out a form to all the club leaders at the high school. So when we did that club fair, all of the clubs registered for that, so we have the list of all their emails and all the clubs, so we'll just be sending it out to all of them and getting their responses, and we can take that feedback and change the policies accordingly. On the LAC, this was almost a month ago now, but we haven't had a meeting in a while. Kira Shones, another student on the LAC, we moderated the candidate forum together, which went very well. We had some great discussions, some debates between our candidates running for state legislature. And for anyone watching who didn't attend that, I would highly recommend you look it up. To educate your vote in this election. The account that posted it on YouTube is Hopkins Schools Legislative Action Coalition. A mouthful, but highly recommend you check out that forum. And lastly, I would like to update on the holidays, of course, because this is the first meeting we've had since we had days off for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. In my opinion, it had exactly the effect it was supposed to have. I was able to celebrate the holidays in the way they were meant to be celebrated. I was able to be in synagogue without thinking of my calculus homework, which was a nice relief. And I've heard pretty much the same thing from all of my other Jewish peers. We did not have to make up work when we came back to school due to our religion. And just as importantly, there was no feeling of exclusion or alienation due to missing those days. So I would The one problem, which I did mention in the workshop, was that some extracurriculars did still happen. But other than that, I would say that this new calendar was a huge success. And because it's not a policy, it's just the calendar that's approved every year, I would definitely urge the board to continue including this, including minority holidays as a consideration when planning calendars. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. Thanks for your work on both the monitoring committee and with the LAC. You know, as we know, policies are most effective when those affected by them are at the table. And when you can bring in the voices of your peers to give input, that just helps us make better policy. So really appreciate all of your work in multiple areas.
Thank you.
All right. My name is Grace Riley. I am the 11th grade representative for the Hopkins School Board. And as both of my representatives have touched on already, homecoming was a very major success. The theme was, I believe it was glow crazy, something along those lines. It was a big turnout for sure. And I think a lot of people were really cognizant of the theme this year compared to other years where it was like either people didn't really know we had a theme or it just wasn't really spoken about. This year, from decorations to music to lighting to even some outfits, it was very apparent that the theme was glow. So it was really cool to see. And then I did want to touch on some sports news. So at this point, all of our sports have had their annual Pink Out Games, which for those who are not familiar, it's a day where student sections and athletes dress up head to toe as much as possible in pink to support breast cancer awareness. And then all of the funds from those games, whether it be like food purchases or ticket purchases, all go to support various causes that work against breast cancer. So that was really cool to see. I know personally I went to the volleyball game, and I want to say there was over $100, maybe even $150 raised from that game alone. So definitely successes across the board. And just to note again on volleyball, they currently are moving to our sectional championship, and their game is tonight at 7 o'clock. So we are wishing them the best of luck.
Thank you so much, Grace. I hadn't heard about the Pink Out before. That's really interesting. Really cool. Yeah, thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Samia, and I'm the 10th grade representative. There wasn't much to report on for just sophomores alone, but recently Hopkins has ended up on the news, alphanews.org, because a parent set them a fight that occurred on school grounds. Mr. Quayles, one of the news anchors, says what happened in the video is a symptom of a larger problem in our community, referring to the Black community. Then he proceeds to show a video of a kid fighting a police officer and says, "This is another symptom we are finding in our homes, where we have fatherless homes, fatherless communities, where no father has been involved at all and is playing out a role in our schools with our children." Ms. Quayles, another news anchor, says Hopkins was Minnesota's first national school of excellence, and it was the best school in the state, but it just declined. A lot of parents are pulling their students out of Hopkins public schools and sending them to Minnetonka. The students in my grade talked about this, obviously, on their Snapchat stories, saying how they felt offended because many of them did have fathers, and getting compared to another school did not feel good. Another thing is that the bathrooms keep being locked, and this frustrates many students, especially the non-binary students, because, it's unfair that we can't use the bathroom because of our peers' action, one of my classmates said when I asked them about the situation. I don't skip in them, and I don't use them to do anything but use the bathroom. I don't feel comfortable using a specific assigned gender restroom, which are perfectly available to cisgender people, so why are the non-binary restrooms being locked when we haven't done anything to deserve it? To end on a positive note, the outdoor adventure students went on went on many hiking trips this month. The students that went told many stories about what happened and what they did on the trip. It was nice to see students speak kindly about a school activity, and I'm sure this encouraged many students to want to sign up for the class next year. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are so happy to have you here, and thank you for a fantastic first board report. You brought up some really crucial issues that are impacting a lot of us in our community when we think about how narratives are put forward that do not accurately reflect what's happening in our schools, that reinforce bias and racist stereotypes, and that we need to address those things. And it was really interesting to hear the conversations that have been happening amongst the student body. Thank you too for your advocacy for non-binary students, and the bathroom issue is ongoing. You know, we've heard feedback on this before, and it's really important to bring these issues forward, and I appreciate your voice. So with that, thank you to our wonderful student board representatives for always bringing truth to this table. And let's move on to our superintendent's report with Dr. Mary Peary-Reed.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland, and thank you, student board reps, for your reports. We all enjoy listening to them. And just so you know, Principal Ballard and her team also tune in, so they are interested in knowing what you're going to share, and then especially regarding the bathrooms, then these are specific issues that they can pay attention to the following day. So thank you for sharing. So yes, we haven't met for I think 3 weeks now, so a lot has happened. Lots of positive events across all of our schools. And, you know, in the fall is a popular time for our schools to have gatherings for families that allow students and families to come together and celebrate being back in school. So most, if not all, of our schools have held various fall events. Some examples include Glen Lake's Walkathon fundraiser. Meadowbrook had a huge fundraising carnival. Our junior highs both had mural painting parties. Our high school, of course, you heard about the homecoming festivities, including the Pep Fest and the game and the dance. And also Harley Hopkins had a fun family night with fire trucks and face painting. Here are a couple of photos from the Young People's Concert that was organized and conducted by Allison Swigum and held in the mall at Hopkins High School. Folks who attended the event, including our Director of Communications and Marketing, Jolene, was with her kiddos, witnessed our high school musicians playing in their pajamas, and completely unfazed by the 40 or maybe 50 toddlers who were sometimes sitting down attentively and other times very adorably throwing their stuffed animals quite all over the place. So it was a wonderful event, but also one that showcased our students' musicianship. So I really enjoyed attending that. On the next slide, you'll see pictures from West Junior High, who hosted a staff versus student basketball game last Wednesday. Principal Campy, she's here in our audience. You're very brave for having all 600 plus students who were all together in the gymnasium space and completely riveted to watching this student versus staff basketball game. The staff were battling rotations of 5-person student teams who were very intent on beating their teachers and staff. So it was, I think mostly it was a very fun event, correct, Dr. Campy? We had one staff person who had a knee injury during that time, so hopefully he's doing okay. So that was really fun to see and really great positive energy in that space. It was wonderful. On the next slide, you'll see some additional photos showcasing our school's fall activities. The Tanglin Block Party was held on September 21st. Families enjoyed a night of free food, a DJ, Ninja Warrior course, inflatables, a photo booth, and more. The Meadowbrook Fundraiser Carnival was on September 30th, and that is Meadowbrook's biggest annual event and second largest fundraiser. And then the Grizzlies raised more than $45,000 at Glen Lake's Walk and Rollathon on October 7. So these are some great elementary activities. And then in this next slide, you'll see the photos showcasing some of the activities at our secondary level. Oscar talked about the activity fair for students that was held on September 23, and this was a student-led showcase that allowed opportunities to either deepen engagement in a current interest or explore a new passion or interest. And then, of course, one of the homecoming highlights was Murad and Taylor, who were named Homecoming King and Queen. And then in the bottom left, you'll see a picture of West Junior High's mural party commemorating their journey to becoming a community school. Current students were invited, as well as students from the 5th and 6th grade students from our feeder elementaries were invited to join in on the fun. So all of the painters were included, the littlest students, all the way to Vice Chair Andreessen's, I think, 6-foot son, and then my son was also there. So you have these very tall students joining in with the littles doing the painting. And Principal Camphy, when is that wall going to be completed? Probably by the end of this week. The end of this week. So we'll all have to go and see the work of art. It will be just as sparkly, I think, as the first wall. Really, really beautiful. So we're excited to see that, and then we're excited to see the mural that's being done at North Junior High as well. I'd love to highlight our technology department, as September 21st was IT Professionals Day. This department is led by our Director of IT Services, John Wetter, who is very committed to ensuring all of our students and educators are equipped with devices that are properly supported by a strong tech team. This team has also been busy conducting a software inventory, managing internet outages, and Mr. Wetter explained that these outages stemmed from outside of the Hopkins network. And of course, the team has been helping all of us navigate password changes and copy machine upgrades and so much more. So there's a lot that we don't see, but we do expect quality in our technology services, so we're very grateful for the work of Mr. Wetter and his team, and we celebrate our IT professionals. We also celebrated our nutrition services colleagues, otherwise known as School Lunch Heroes. The week of October 10, they invited administrators and folks from the district office to serve lunch in all of our schools. So our students during that week saw some new and hopefully friendly faces behind the serving line. I was at Alice Smith, and I was assigned to scoop roasted turkey and noodles onto the plates of very hungry and eager eaters. And so in this picture, you see Principal Ness serving at Eisenhower and Assistant Principal Farley serving at our high school. And then finally, I just wanted to briefly touch on the topic of professional learning and our strategic improvement plan. So not only do we have a bold vision for transformation in Hopkins Public Schools, we also have a detailed roadmap designed to help us arrive at that vision. And most recently, we've designed a support and accountability system that is aligned with our work deliverables within our 3 goal areas: learning and teaching, district operations, and school and district culture. And the reason for this support and accountability system is that Vision 2031 is a very audacious vision, and is also experienced by many as aspirational. So we knew that we would need a project management plan to project map our work, and then monitoring and check-in system to gauge our progress along the way. So we've been organizing ourselves and organizing our thinking around what these project outputs and outcomes are, who's managing the teams, which people are sitting on the teams and engaged in the work, and how we're all working together to check in on a regular basis to monitor and report out our progress. So yesterday we had the first of 2 training sessions, and also our innovation design and learning team has also been thoroughly trained in project scoping and mapping. So it's really exciting work. It can feel overwhelming. It's a new way of organizing ourselves around the work, but also these tools will be very helpful because we want to be intentional about how we progress toward Vision 2031. And our roadmap will help us get there. So with that, I'll take any questions from board members or student board reps.
I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you. I was wondering if the board members can get Principal Ballard's Friday communications, or if there is another place where our activities are kind of centrally located, because I sit here and I'm like, wow, that was amazing. And if it's kind of outside my immediate school ecosystem, or a really publicized event that I don't even know that they happen.
So are you thinking that each board member might receive notifications on activities that are happening within the 2 or 3 schools you've been paired with? Is that what you're thinking? Or more that you would like to know more broadly what's happening ahead of time at all of our schools? Or are you thinking in particular the high school because maybe there's a higher concentration of activities there?
Well, when I first spoke, I guess I was picturing kind of the density of activities at the high school. However, since we kind of have this pairing and this board goal, maybe that makes sense. I think I would be open to what that looks like. But I know that I just very often see these really cool events that are happening that I didn't know about. I'm not sure if my other board colleagues feel the same, but
I think last year, or maybe was it before that, that we used to get newsletters in our, what's that part of our email where we, there's the focused emails and then there's the general emails. Formerly, I remember that we used to get newsletters via that email system. I don't know if they've continued that though, but we used to.
I'm not sure what you're referring to. Maybe what we could start with is, what if we put together a list of all of the ways that we communicate out, and these would be ways that we hope you also currently have access to, so that you can sort of check your current access to all of the ways we're attempting to communicate with multiple audiences. And then if you feel that something's either there's a disconnect or something's missing, or you want closer or more frequent or different access, then we might work to personalize something that works for you.
certainly, yeah, I think, I know I get Meadowbrook and North in particular, plus in part of several, Facebook groups and follow website announcements. And so for those specific ecosystems, I feel like I'm pretty well informed. And so I think it could be pretty like low hanging fruit that it might be those schools.
Because your children are
Because of that, but
students there.
specifically, like at the end of all of our principal s'mores reports things that we get, it just says here, for the next couple of weeks, here's the big events that are happening. And
those have served, at least to my mind, have clued me into everything important that's happening there specifically. And I think that it's probably a solved problem already, and that idea of knowing all of these different mechanisms that they get communicated in would be helpful.
Okay, so we'll start there, and then I'll work with Jolene to create that list, and then maybe identify some additional possibilities, and then we'll see how people feel, because I think there might be varying levels of wanting more information. I don't know. I don't want to inundate your inbox, I think is what I'm trying to avoid.
That sounds great. Other questions or comments for Dr. Mary Peary-Reed? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we'll move to the approval of the agenda, so I would look for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, I would look for a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we'll move to our treasurer's report, which is usually with Treasurer Adams, who could not be with us tonight. Clerk Peterson will be playing the role of Treasurer Adams this evening, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland. Apologies, I'm not as witty or as good-looking as Treasurer Adams, but I will do my very best. Also, to Treasurer Adams, we hope you are recovering and feeling well as quickly as possible. Complete and quick recovery to you. So first thing we'll start off with is the enrollment report. October 3rd was the first enrollment report of the school year. We were down 270 students from projections. That showed up as 100 fewer elementary students and 107 fewer secondary students. Across those two sets of students, we also had 65 fewer virtual EDU students. One little bright spot is that we did have 11 more kindergartners than projected. On to expenses of note. We have $2,100 for graduation expenses, $40,000 in annual software subscriptions, $441,000 for final fiscal year 22 expenses for our relationship with District 287. We had $16,388 for nursing services rendered at Gatewood, Alice Smith, the high school, and the non-public schools that we support. $10,000 for Rosetta Stone language learning software. $28,874 for annual subscriptions to Johnson's Control software, and $476,900 for the Alice Smith parking lot paving project. And I decided to try my hand at Treasurer Adams' report, and I found a couple of other notable expenditures that I just wanted to bring to your attention. There was $401.90 to Specialty Pyrotechnics for the glitter streamer launchers at the 22 graduation, which was a highlight. It really was, I think, worth every penny.
Worth it.
And then $443.68 to Groth Music in exchange for 82 recorders, to which I apologize to all the parents who are receiving those recorders. I've been there, and it's not easy. So with that, I look for a motion to approve total disbursements of $5,515,624.59 for the period of September 13th, 2022 through October 18th, 2022.
Thank you very much. I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the treasurer's report. Any discussion?
Chair Westmoreland?
Yes.
Clerk Peterson, on the enrollment report, I'm not sure if, I thought I heard 270.
207.
Okay,
Yep.
good. Okay, because it is 207.
207 fewer students.
All right, thank
Sorry.
you.
Yep.
Excellent, thank you. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you very much, Director Peterson. Next, we'll move into unfinished business. We have multiple policy discussions tonight, into new business. We don't have any unfinished business. We have multiple policy discussions tonight, and I will turn it over to Vice Chair Andreessen, who heads up our Policy and Monitoring Committee.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland. The first policy that we will be discussing tonight is Policy 209. I know it's been a while since we've been here at the table together, so I'll just remind everyone that this policy was requested that we talk more in detail. I think it is an important discussion since it refers to us specifically. It's our school board code of ethics and operating principles. I think it's nice to review it, but also to look at if we think that our current board culture and the way we want to operate aligns with the policy that I think has been on the books for a while. So I'm looking forward to a robust discussion. In particular, I think one of the specifics that was pulled out when we first talked about this policy was the part it's part 2, section A, maybe the first line, attend school board meetings. And it's unfortunate, I think Treasurer Adams was the one who wanted us to speak more to this specific line item and is unable to be here. But I think I look forward to having more of a discussion about what that means. When the monitoring committee talked about it more in depth, we got the reference to the state statute, which has also been included for all of us to look at and read and discuss tonight, which I think gives us more guidelines about what that means to attend school board meetings. They have pretty clear direction about if the board wants to take action on a colleague that isn't attending meetings. So with that, I'll turn that over to Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot in case I've missed anything, because I feel like it's been a while.
It has been. And part of that, I think the other question was, within the policy, did we want to look at any specific threshold? Did we want to look at any number of times in which we may need to direct the board to consider action? And as part of the dialogue with the committee, that's where we thought the statute might be helpful. Specifically, that information was included and is identified in subdivision 4 about actions that can be taken. To draw your attention to that as part of an ill or absent member set of circumstances.
Yeah, and I think just in case any of you had forgotten or whatever, he was just concerned that it wasn't included in our policy, but our policy does reference this statute. And so essentially what we felt as a policy committee, that despite our specific policy not calling out any repercussions or limitations or thresholds on attendance by our board members, that essentially because we reference this additional statute and take this into account, that this would cover that particular concern of Treasurer Adams about vacancies or non-attendance. So we didn't feel as a committee that we necessarily needed to add those into the policy specifically because of this reference. And yeah, again, without Treasurer Adams here, I'm not sure how we feel about voting on that policy change or policy clarification from a procedural perspective.
One option that's available to us is we could, someone could float a motion to add this to our next agenda, which would be on November 15th, so that Director Adams could be part of the conversation. So procedurally, we could absolutely do that. We don't have to vote on it tonight.
Because he was originally the one with the concern, I would personally feel better having him at the table before we take a vote. So I would float a motion to table this discussion until the November 15th meeting.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to table this discussion this evening and then put it on the November 15th agenda so that our full board can participate. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, so, sorry, you didn't get your robust discussion, Vice Chair Andreessen, but you'll get it on the 15th.
I'll get it later. That's all I need.
That's just a delayed gratification moment. Okay, so we'll move into the second agenda item, which is policies and first read, and I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. I will turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Nick Lightfoot to go over each of these policies and offer up. They're pretty routine. They're all about us, the board, and beyond, I think, 209, I don't think there was much discussion around making changes. So.
Thank you, Vice Chair Andreessen. As part of the continual work that we are doing, you have specific policies in front of you this evening. We'll begin with 101, which is the legal status of the school district. As you will note from our policy and the work that was done with the Minnesota School Board Association model policy, this really hasn't undergone any major revisions or any statutory change since really early 2000s, and really was just a peripheral review that we did of it, did not recommend any changes, and would certainly be open to any questions or clarifications that other board members might have related to Policy 101.
I think we can move ahead.
Great. Next one is a similar. It is the school board legal status as carrying out its mission, and as well with the specific governing authority that is outlined for school boards contained within Policy 201. Likewise, there have been no real revisions since 2009 in model policy, nor at this present time are we recommending as a policy monitoring committee any changes. Again, any questions, comments, or clarifications we can provide for 201.
Thank you.
202, board position responsibilities. As part of our cycle of review, this also is up this year for review. There are specific position responsibilities that are outlined within the policy. As you will note, model MSBA policy has not changed since 2011. As we looked at our own rules, responsibilities within the school board operations, are not recommending any changes at this time, and certainly can be open to any questions or other information that might be helpful related to Policy 202.
Looks like we can keep moving.
Great. 203, operation of the school board governing rules for meetings. Very brief but specific in those stated rules. No specific changes in MSBA model policy since 2009. We are also not recommending any changes to the present policy, and certainly can address any questions or concerns.
Looks like we're good.
All right. School board procedures, rules of order outlined in 203.1. Again, this one, no specific changes since 1999. And as well, we have no recommended changes with this, just part of our annual review cycle.
Great, thank you.
We did have a change noted in 203.2, which is order of regular school board meeting. What we did note with this policy is to reflect the previous modifications that had been made. looking at the placements of open agendas, and would want this to be reflected and have so noted and changed to 203.2. Would be open for any additional questions or comments related to 203.2.
Okay.
Moving on, 203.6, consent agendas specific to the consent agenda and how that agenda is processed. No recommended changes. Again, no model MSBA policy change since 1999. In our review, we did not see any necessary changes as well. So we would move this forward with no change as well. Open to questions, comments, or concerns.
Excellent, thanks.
Lastly, 353 is the temporary administrative arrangements. This is a Hopkins policy as to how we would approach any absence or component related to such an administrative absence as outlined in policy. We are not recommending any change to this at this time. Certainly would be open to any questions that would be related to this.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate you taking us through those, Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot. Anything from the board before we move to our vote? Okay, so I would look for a motion that the board approve the above policies in first read. Further, the board direct the administration to prepare the policies for approval and second reading at the next meeting as part of consent.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second to approve the above policies in first read. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next, we'll move to our substitute usage report. I'll turn it over to Dr. Mary Peary-Reed.
Thank you, Chair Westmoreland, and I invite Dr. Lightfoot to remain at the table and help us understand this report. In your packet, you'll see a multi-page summary, year-end summary from Teachers on Call, which is our partner organization to help us provide substitute teachers for our vacancies that we experience. And so Nick will help us understand what our substitute usage looked like for school year 21-22.
Thank you. We did make sure that we provided you with the end-of-year report from Teachers on Call so that you could take a look at the information from last year. While not so far away, it is very close as we think about last year's experience within absences and the impact that had on our system related to pandemic absences, and as well to a very different labor pool of available individuals to assist when the need for substitute staffing occurred. I think as you'll see in the numerous charts and data that are presented there, what we saw was an unprecedented doubling, even tripling in some cases, the amount of need that we would otherwise see in any given year for this level of service, and the availability of individuals to provide that service was as well a very complicating factor. You will see that those trends are outlined in the data, and as we have looked at the opening of this year, we continue to track that information. What we are seeing, especially within the labor pool, as much as the recruitment is done at every area in which we can, the availability of individuals to fill assignments continues to be an issue metro-wide, continues to be an issue locally, continues, as the data and the report also identifies, continues to be national issues as well. We know that from the data sets, not only of our neighboring school districts throughout the state of Minnesota, but also the nation as a whole. And as we continue to look towards solutions and different problems that continue to develop, we are in partner with our Education Association and looking at how we can accommodate and provide services when staffing absences occur We are looking creatively at ways in which we can recruit, but with low unemployment, with many opportunities for many individuals, individuals looking to have this level of casual employment being slim to none in many cases, it continually is a challenge in front of us. We've started to look at other ways that we might be able to look at this, not only in short term, because even within short-term projections and within long-term projections that we've received from the Department of Economic Development throughout the state, we know that these will continually be challenges for us into the future as well. As we continually look at that, we're looking at different kinds of ways in which we can staff, ways in which we can collaboratively plan for experiences within the classroom with groups of individuals. We've been looking at and have been working with a partnership with the American, Rhoda, what does AASA stand for? It's a Superintendent Association.
American Association of School Administrators.
Thank you. We've been working with that association and part of its partnership with Arizona State University on some collaborative staffing models that are looking at different ways to align staffing to help accommodate for these kinds of sets of circumstances. And we've been exposed to some different ways that different places throughout the nation are looking to address the shortfalls that all are experiencing. So with that, I do believe the report outlines a few of the data points. Can certainly be open to any other questions or sets of information that might be helpful to you. I do believe on page 20 of the report there are some specific items of current statistics and goals that are helpful as we take a look at what we can do. This is a continual discussion among HR directors throughout the course of the state. And as many measures as people are taking, the rates continually remain consistent. In part of what we see and what we have continually tried to address is, do increases in compensation increase rate fills? Do other elements increase rate fills? Are there other ways of making some decisions that are in front of us? And what we do know is that for us in the future, part of what we need to consider is maybe some of the way in which we need to look at within different staffing models are, do we rely on casual subs, or as many spaces are also experiencing, do we need to look at an investment and a larger investment in individuals being hired on permanent basis in full-time positions that really provide this set of services? Obviously, those kinds of models are more expensive and something that we need to think through in the course of the budget. But as we continually do so, if we are seeing some of those ways of addressing the situation that we have in front of us, if those ways are effective, we have to look at the value of the cost, we have to look at the need for the service, and then make those decisions accordingly. So all of this information is in front of you. I'm more than happy to address anything that's within the report. We are continually, on the last piece that I'll raise, looking at the rates that we do have. Annually, we do look at that right around this October-November timeframe to make sure that we're in line with neighboring districts with what we are offering for compensation. And should any of those rates change, as you are aware, we will bring that rate recommendation in front of you, but wanted to make sure that you had the context and the data prior to seeing anything that we might recommend for those changes. So with that, any questions, comments, concerns, or additional information I might be able to provide?
Dr. Lightfoot. So just for an item of clarification for me, essentially, we set the pay rate for our substitutes despite going through Teachers on Call.
Correct.
So when Teachers on Call reaches out to one of their contracted substitutes, do they tell them what they would make that day? Because it seems to me there must be a very complicated list of everybody paying different rates. Like, is there data about schools at this rank, what they pay and their fill rates?
Well, the way that the subpool works is that individuals can choose their district and can choose their assignment. It's an open architecture so that individuals have the ability to choose those assignments. And as that, individuals can choose as a substitute instructor to work in any district that they would choose to work in. So Teachers on Call does manage those sets of information for their employees, and they get to choose, like you just identified, those districts and where they want to work. As we have that partnership and engage with them, what we know is that most people choose the assignments that are most proximate to their home or their location. Some people, depending on the rate or where it might be, many people that have the interest in doing this may also say, I only want to sub in kindergarten, or I only will sub in media centers. And with the luxury that they have of doing so, they continually will do so. So there are some of those elements that also play into it, as well as rates and rates of pay.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions?
I just had a quick clarifying question. I think you touched on it at the end, but wanted to make sure I was wrapping my brain around what these statistics were reflecting. And they are not those subs that we, as a district, have kind of brought in ourselves. These are just, this rate and information is just on Teachers on Call. Is that correct?
Kind of. It's a little bit more nuanced and complex. Sometimes we do hire our in-building subs through Teachers on Call, and so they are paid a higher rate for that service. So sometimes we do that. Sometimes in the last year of the pandemic, we last year hired our own as well. So we did dual recruitment. We used Teachers on Call because they were literally exhausted of individuals. We did our own recruitment. So we had both operating at the same time. We are set to have that happen, but the labor pool right now being non-existent, and I hope the report also brought out the distinction in looking at not only teacher subs when we think of substitutes, but also looking at paraprofessional substitutes. Because that's really where we've seen the extreme difficulty, is looking at finding individuals who are willing to assist as paraprofessionals for any day. And that continues to be a staffing challenge, even within full-time paraprofessional positions throughout the metro area.
Yeah,
So
I
when we look
appreciated
at
that
the overall
inclusion.
piece, as you pointed out, that's really some of the complexity of the data is that it includes both, all within this data set.
Okay, so the subs that we work with directly in the district and the Teachers on Call are all included in this report?
Yes, and the way that they're included is that we look to staff and utilize in-building staff first as much as we can because we know those assignments are covered. What happens is when we have greater need, then obviously that need goes into Teachers on Call. So it's that need which is reflected in here, which goes beyond what our staffing level was able to provide for and what Teachers on Call was able to provide for with the even greater existing unfilled need that exists as well. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Lightfoot?
Yes.
May I ask on the graphs on pages 5, 7, 9, when there's an absence volume on the left, what unit is that? Is that hours?
Numbers of assignments. So when we look at where we are with the volume, and it's looking at that, if you will, the total filled and unfilled absences. So if you look at, I'll just use September on page, I was on page 4, but if you look at overall on page 4, and you look at that total number, that volume is right around that 778. And you'll see that part of those were filled, part of those were unfilled, and those are the number of requests. I think, what also is happening is that we are seeing greater numbers of requests as well as the struggling with individuals to fill that. So hopefully that's kind of what they've tried to use those 3 data points to show here of volume, fill rate, and then the information around what's filled and unfilled.
So 778 requests
for the month of September.
in our district? I don't even know what that means as far as person hours, or like what does one person being out ill for the day, how many, is that one request?
Could it also be one course period at the high school? Or would it have to be a whole day?
Some of it's full day, some of it's half day. So when you look at the number of requests, a request will come in, and then it's what that need to fill looks like. So if you want to take Monday as an example, for example, on Monday, we had 63 individuals throughout the course of the district on Monday that were out that we needed to provide services for.
And Nick, these are just licensed teachers, or are these also paraprofessionals?
Also paraprofessionals.
Okay. Who are calling in absent, whether they need a sub or not, or only if they need a sub?
They are potentially for both. So for example, if you have a licensed individual whose services may be provided by somebody else on that day, or they could see students on a different day, they might not need someone in that classroom. We do track that absence, but they might not need someone in a specific classroom to take that. Others might have classroom responsibilities for instruction, and they need to be in that space.
I had a question. So in this case, since it is a statewide issue, what has the Minnesota Department of Education recommended?
Not that much.
Okay.
The way in which we've seen some response is to see if there's a way that they can expedite processing of substitute licenses, seeing if there are ways that they can encourage individuals to consider substitute work. Part of that has been some of it, but not a large response, if you will, such that it has enabled districts to fill these positions more readily or in a fashion that has raised rates of fill significantly.
And one more thing, I wanted to say that in Wilmer, because of their worker shortage, they actually hired teachers from abroad, from the Philippines and Nicaragua. I don't know, it's on Minnesota Public Radio. So that was an interesting and eye-opening report to hear. I don't know how they did that, by the way, just out of curiosity. I'm assuming it would cost a lot of money, but I'm just curious. I wonder how that was.
Well, we likewise, if you are looking for, and this is a new phenomenon even within the state, if you are looking for individuals, it is not uncommon now for global individuals to apply for positions and have districts sponsor them because they know the need is that great. So for example, in math and sciences and areas in which there are few candidates in an area of licensure, it is not uncommon that international applicants will apply to a district and look for that district sponsorship then to assist them through with their hiring process to be considered as a teaching candidate. We have seen that. We have, we just finished an applicant who was an applicant for our immersion teaching program that we were able to get from Central America. So any way that people can source great talent, we're really now, when we look at our Vision 2031, talking about global experiences, we are in that context.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Any other comments or questions for Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot?
Yes, I do have one additional question. Was there an overall district fill rate? I do see and have noted that Teachers on Call provided some very interesting data about across the state and the nation, where they have at least like a 10% reduction in the amount of vacancies they were able to fill, and so we're hovering in that low 60% to be able to fill. And ours, I could do the math, of course, but seem kind of across They vary wildly month to month.
Yeah, I mean, I think on page 5, it refers to the fill rate trend overall. Of course, it's different for different months, and we can average that, but, I mean, for me, the helpful information that's here is that this isn't specific to a month or like something that has been an isolated phenomenon. This is a continued experience that we know we have to plan for and be mindful of, that is continually with us throughout the course of the year. And even as we look at the start of this year, wondering, okay, so where our absences sit and labor pool, thinking we have far less absences than we did when we were looking at the isolation and quarantine periods with COVID. But our fill rates are about the same percent, and actually for September, we're a couple points less. So we continually are seeing less individuals, even with all the recruiting efforts and energies that are going into it, continually seek this option and opportunity to look at this level of casual employment. So we know that we need to do our work of making sure that our buildings are welcoming, that they are affirming of individuals that are giving of their time and talents to do this work, and continually looking at ways in which we can redesign and continually refine ways in which we can make sure that we have great people in front of our students.
Certainly, and thank you for that information. I guess I was looking specifically to, it looks as though on the page that you referenced then, that our numbers would average out to be roughly in the low 60s, and therefore completely following this state and national trend.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Assistant Superintendent Lightfoot. This context is certainly important for us as board members as we consider potential budgetary impacts, and for our community members as well, to really understand what a serious situation this is. We certainly know anecdotally that it puts incredible strain on our staff and our administrators when we face substitute shortages, whether that's with licensed teachers or paraprofessionals. So really appreciate this report and the time you took with us to help us understand it this evening. This was an information-only item, so no action is required. And so we can move on to our board member reports. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm really missing Treasurer Adams right
I
now.
know, he usually kicks us off, right?
And
Yeah.
Then I usually don't have to say anything about the LAC.
You just go same, right?
Yeah.
Well, it looks like it's
But
all
I think
you.
Oscar stepped into that role. Thank you very much, Oscar, for talking about the candidate forum. I think it was a good one. And also it was wonderful to have students involved, asking questions of people who are seeking to represent them in education. So really appreciate you and Kira showing up and being there. And serving in the way that you did with asking questions. We had representatives from all of the districts. We now only have 10 districts in our school district that are represented by a representative and a senator. So we no longer, we used to have 12. So there's a little bit of reduction there, but we had at least one candidate from each part of our district represented, so that was good. We got to hear from all of them about education and what they're going to do if they get elected to the state legislature. I will have to say I am disappointed that a lot of candidates didn't show up, which I think I would urge everyone to pay attention to, because education is not a political issue. It is something that impacts every family and every person in this country, because we are, this is our future. And so if a candidate doesn't feel it's necessary to talk with their constituents about education, I would be concerned as a voter. That's the only message I will send about that. But the LAC has been meeting. We are talking about the issues that are going to be important that we bring before our representatives when they start this session in January. And looking forward to talking with community members about what is important to you, also to our district leaders about issues that they're seeing in the district that we can take to our legislators. So we're working on our platform and are going to be excited to bring it to the board when it's complete.
Excellent. We'll be excited to see it.
Thanks.
Thank you. Other board member reports.
Chair Westmoreland.
Yes, Director Khan.
I would like to say what an honor it has been to be part of this dynamic group of students for our student board reps. Being their liaison has been really eye-opening. It shows what a fantastic, I don't mean to call the students products, but what a fantastic education our students are given. They are so well-rounded, so, you know, they just take charge, and I really appreciate that, and I'm really grateful for Hopkins and the fact that they turn out such amazing, proactive students. And I was really proud and honored to be part of the process where our student board reps chose our new board reps from the sophomore class, and how Oscar came up with, what did you call it?
We had quite a bit of difficulty after the first 2 rounds
'Cause they were so
of
awesome.
applicants because everybody was just so qualified. So I came up with the idea of having them do a mock board report. So we had our own pretend board meeting and had each applicant come in and give a report, basically.
Yep, and that was really fun.
What a great idea.
Yeah.
Are there opportunities to plug in these really qualified candidates who are not selected, you know, into some of our committee work, for example, or other areas that you've identified?
We have talked about that. I think it was in the Policy and Monitoring Committee where we talked about that. Especially with these policies where we're sending them out to club leaders. We've talked about including some of these applicants on that. So while they might not be officially student board reps, they still may have valuable input on policies. And I believe the LAC is open to anybody, so
Absolutely.
they could join that.
Great.
Yep, and the second thing I wanted to mention is that I was part of the Hopkins Educator of Color Mentorship Program meeting that we had, and I am so inspired by Scott Endo and Paris Timmons, because they are both leaders of this group, and I really love how they have this fantastic purpose of being inclusive and supportive of our educators of color in our district. And it's just great to be part of them and see all the support we get. Even I get support, which I love. So yeah, it was really great to be part of that community building almost type of initiative. And that's my report.
Excellent, thank you.
Chair Westmoreland.
Yes, Director Hartland.
Thank you very much. It has been some time since we met in person, so I've gotten to participate in a few things in our community. One is volunteering with the Meadowbrook Fundraiser Carnival, which was an unbelievable turnout and could not have been better weather. And so families and students turned out by the hundreds for a night of fundraising, but also playing a whole variety of games and getting to engage in there with their school teachers and leaders in some really fun ways, including a dunk tank. And then the Meadowbrook PTO supports conference meals for their Meadowbrook teachers. And so they feed them lunch and dinner to support this really big undertaking of the staff to take time to meet with every single family. And so that was some very nice time that I got to spend inside Meadowbrook.
And then I was going to give one last plug for to our community members to please watch the candidate forum videos. Oscar mentioned it's on YouTube, and it is the whole Hopkins Schools Legislative Action Coalition. But Googling that will give you links to the forums that we put on. Oscar and Kira did a great job. It was quite a bit of work from the LAC and does provide some insight into what our candidates are thinking with regards to education ahead of our November 8th upcoming election. And unfortunately, illness kept me from homecoming. I was really looking forward to that, but I'm excited about some opportunities to be more connected with community events going forward.
Wonderful, thank you. Other board member reports. So earlier this month, I had the opportunity to attend the ICA Food Shelf Great Taste fundraiser. I sat at a table with some of our Hopkins scholars and graduates, Dominique Pierre-Toussaint, who's the Community Outreach Coordinator for ICA, Tracy Stanton, the Executive Director of Resource West, Mayor Patrick Hanlon, Mayor of Hopkins, Commissioner Chris Latondras. And it was really great to be in community with all of them and other fantastic community members who support the work of ICA. We've, here in Hopkins Schools, have had a growing partnership with ICA, with food shelves and resource centers at multiple sites throughout the district. And one of the videos that was shared at the event was focused on that growing partnership. So it was fantastic to be there and to celebrate the work that we're doing with ICA and to support that work moving forward. I also attended the Hopkins Community Safety Group. This is a group that was convened by the City of Hopkins, specifically Mayor Hanlon. And we've been working since last spring to ensure holistic safety and a thriving community by focusing on the needs of youth and young adults and their support systems. So the City of Hopkins has dedicated some of their ARPA funds to 3 proposals that we brought forward as a school district team last spring that have now been funded and are underway. So I wanted to update our community on that. One is a partnership with the Santa Foundation that offers mentoring at our high school. Another initiative is an embedded social worker with the Hopkins Police. And then a joint government powers and community collaborative organization called the Generation Enhanced Network that some of our Hopkins students and recent grads helped us build the framework for this summer. I'm currently partnering with Dominique Pierre-Toussaint at ICA Food Shelf, Commissioner Chris Latondras, and Mayor Hanlon in building out the joint powers kind of framework so that we can continue to build this collaborative structure to meet the needs of youth and families in our community. So I'll continue to update the board on that. We will have a more specific and detailed presentation on the Generation Enhanced Network. The acronym is GEN, which has become confusing, but we will have a more detailed presentation on that this winter. I was recently appointed to the Heading Home Hennepin Executive Committee. So this is a continuum of care partnership to end homelessness within Hennepin County. They were looking for someone with a public schools perspective. And so I interviewed this summer and then was recently appointed. The first meeting is next week. I have a steep learning curve ahead of me to learn about the work of this group and bring the priorities of our community to that work. And so I will keep you updated on that as well. We've had numerous references this evening to the upcoming election. Our LAC continues to do phenomenal work to educate members of our community about the importance of researching candidates. Public education is certainly on the ballot. on November 8th if we consider the budgetary and policy impacts that midterm elections can have on our public education system, as are a whole host of other issues that intersect with public education that impact our community, thinking about racial and gender justice, rights for LGBTQ+ community members, protections for our immigrant communities, and more. So I urge all of our community members to research the candidates who are on the ballot and turn out to vote on or before November 8th because early voting is now open. Last call for board member reports. Okay, then we will move on to our second public comment period. This period is for topics that are not on the agenda. So I'll read through our guidelines for public comment, and I've received one comment card, and I will invite that commenter to the table when I'm done reading through the guidelines. So please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Public comment is for input only. Members of the school board will not respond directly to public comments that are made at this meeting. No specific action will be taken at this meeting in response to comments that are made or issues that are raised during the public comment period related to items not on the agenda. If the board determines that action is appropriate, that action will occur at a future board meeting. If you have left your contact information on the comment card, a district representative may follow up with you after the meeting. I will recognize one speaker at a time. Only those speakers who are recognized will be permitted to speak. Individuals who interfere with or interrupt speakers, the board, or the proceedings may be asked to leave. Personal attacks on any individual, including any other speaker during the public comment session, are unacceptable, as are obscenities or profanity. Persistence in making such remarks will end the individual's opportunity to address the board and may result in the individual being directed to leave. I will rule out of order any statement that would violate state or federal law, school board policy, or the privacy rights of an individual. Minnesota's open meeting law prohibits the discussion of private educational data during an open meeting. Accordingly, during the public comment session, no person may discuss private educational data on an identifiable student. The open meeting law also requires the board to close a meeting for preliminary consideration of allegations against an employee. Accordingly, community members who have concerns about an employee or want to file a complaint or allegations against an employee are encouraged to contact the superintendent directly. We ask you not to name an employee during your not to recognize an employee by name during your comments. Repeated violations of these time, place, and manner restrictions may also lead to the meeting being briefly recessed. Community members will have an opportunity to be heard within the limits of the law and subject to the time, place, and manner restrictions that I've articulated above. Thank you so much for being here and participating in public comment this evening. So I'd like to invite Jiming Zhao to the table. Welcome.
Hi. Hello, members of the school board. I'm Jiming Zhao. I have a second grader in the Hopkins Xinxiang school system, and I've got a preschooler as well that'll be attending soon. So, and I know there's been a lot of discussion with community members and maybe the media around test scores, and so I thought I'd weigh in here. You know, before I make any decision or think about something, I do as much research as I can. I grab as much data as possible, and I wanted to share that with the board as well as the community. You know, I did some literature around academic research and found that the linkages between academic outcomes to income, race, and other social economic factors have been relatively well understood since around the 1960s. Especially median income has been more and more, you know, weighted heavily as found by Greg Duncan of UC Irvine and Richard Murnane of Harvard. So basically, right, there's a lot that obviously goes into education. I don't need to tell the board that, but that is one of the major factors, right? And so In the context of that, right, and I then pulled the census information for Hopkins and our geographic and income closest neighbor, St. Louis Park. According to the 2020 census, SLP actually earned 30% more than Hopkins, right? So they're a little bit richer than we are as far as income goes. Due to the models that I just mentioned previously, you would expect, or the models would kind of expect that SLP would outperform Hopkins as far as test scores go. However, pulling the data from the Minnesota report card website, Hopkins actually outscores SLP by 23% in math and 13% in reading. This is 2022 data, right? So post-pandemic. But even before the pandemic, Hopkins was 18% higher in math and 8% higher in reading, and both school districts were higher, as a baseline. So, as a summary, then, is what I want to say to the board and the community, right? The pandemic impacted everybody, but the less resilient, lower income communities more so, right? And but even despite all that, we are outperforming our nearest peers. I think that I commend the board, the district leadership, teachers, our students, as well as parents, for this really outstanding results. And I think it's easy to read the headline, get a little depressed. And,
We're at 3 minutes. Thank you.
So thank you for your time and your work. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
With that, I would look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. Any discussion? Not tonight. Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. This meeting of the Hopkins School Board is adjourned at 8:30 p.m. Thank you very much.